Very powerful book, Working the Angles by Eugene Peterson. Eugene Peterson is the guy who made the Message Bible. So, you know, the Bible that the translation that likes to exaggerate verses. Not the Amplified, the Message. That same person who made that translation made this book, Working the Angles. And in this book, he talks about one of the ways the enemy does things. He talks about how, and he quotes to set up this whole part in his book, C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, his book, The Screwtape Letters, which is also a really good book to read as well. But I was reading this book maybe like a year ago, and he's talking about how the enemy, how you destroy words. He's like, you destroy a word by associating negative things with it over and over and over again. So when you do that for long enough, you now have a warped negative view of it, and then you move away from it, and then they own that word. So for example, let me give you an example of how this looks. So we talked about Genesis 2 and 3 earlier, right? With the fall of man, as we call it. You get to Genesis 6, what do we have? We have the flood, where God decides, based on his ecosystem, his boundaries, that it's time to wipe out the whole world with a flood. So you read about the flood narrative in Genesis 6, 7, 8, and 9. In Genesis 9, Noah comes out of the ark with his 3 sons, with his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. So 8 of them. And the first thing the Bible tells us Noah does is he makes a sacrifice. And we read about how God puts this bow in the cloud as a promise that he will never do that again. The rainbow, right? Now, for serious Bible students, when we think about the rainbow, we think about, what do we think about? We think about God's promise, God's integrity to his word, that he will never break his word, that he will never flood the world again the way he did before. But like Peterson talks about in his book, they will start associating certain things which are negative. That is how you rob good and try and slip in evil. You take an image or a word and then you swap it out for something different. So now, most children who think about the rainbow or think about an array of colors like that, what do they think about? Should I go deeper? Let's stay on the same topic, but just segue to the side, pivot a little bit, right? For those of us who enjoy reading our King James Bibles, King James Bibles, right? Translations in the English language. In the book of James, James says, hey, look, don't be a respecter of persons. There's a boundary again that God gives, like don't show favoritism, don't be a respecter of person. He says, if a guy comes into your assembly and he's wearing gay clothing, don't treat him better than somebody who isn't wearing nice and good clothes. James isn't saying don't treat some guy who comes in to the assembly like somebody from Sodom. No, that's not what James is saying. Don't think their person's a sodomite. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying don't treat that person like they're wearing homosexual clothing or anything like that. No, that's not what he's saying. Why? Because not too long ago, the word gay meant happy. But when you think about that word today, what does it make you think about? What are the connotations associated with that word? Similar example, you can see what's happening, can't you? You could do this over and over and over again. and you'll see over and over and over again, these words and these concepts are used one way, then it's almost like they're just flipped on their head and they're changed and it means something different.